was treated as a person and not as a product.
In 1955, a 13-year-old Brenda Lee walked up to Judy Garland in Las Vegas, Music, and asked for advice. Judy looked her straight in the eye and said something that would haunt Brenda for decades. When, Music, Judy died from an overdose at 47, Brenda realized she could have ended up the Music same way. The industry pushed her to exhaustion, damaged her vocal cords permanently, and left her fighting for her life in hospital beds. She had outsold Elvis during the 1960s, but no one knew the real price she paid. What Judy warned her about had already started happening. One morning in May 1953, 8-year-old Brenda Lee's life broke apart in a way no child could ever be ready for. Her father, Reuben Lynn C. Tarpley, went off to work at a construction site in Georgia. He had already survived 11 years of military service, including time in Hawaii, just before the attack on Pearl Harbor. But that day, it wasn't war that took him. A hammer slipped from a worker's hands above him and fell hard onto his head. He was rushed to the hospital. Doctors tried brain surgery, but nothing could save him. He died from a brain abscess caused by the impact. He left behind his wife, Grace, Music, and their children with nothing, no savings, no insurance, not even a car, just pure loss. Brenda was only 8, but from that moment, she became the hope of the family. Her mother, Grace, tried to carry the weight, taking jobs at the local cotton mills. She worked 14 to Music 16 hours every single day, coming home with her hands raw from handling cotton for hours on end. Sometimes she worked from sunrise until 9 at night. Yet her weekly earnings barely reached $20. It was never enough. Even school lunches were out of reach for Brenda until one kind teacher, Miss Norton, began secretly packing extra food and pretending she brought too much so Brenda wouldn't feel ashamed. They lived in a tiny 3-room house in Lithonia, Georgia. No paint, no electricity, no running water, just a well outside. No bathroom, only an outhouse. The kitchen had no refrigerator. They didn't own a car. When Brenda visited other kids, she would stare at their refrigerators like they were magic. And when the ice truck came once a week, they stored what little they had in an icebox. Most nights, they didn't have enough to eat. Brenda sometimes went to bed with nothing in her stomach but silence. By the age of 6, she learned her voice could bring food. She would stand on counters in the local store and sing. Customers dropped pennies into a jar. Those pennies bought bread. At 7, she got her first real performance and earned $20, more than her mother made in a week. But she wasn't treated like a star. She was paid in ice cream on radio shows and surrounded by adults who used her voice to Music, draw crowds, but gave her almost nothing in return. When Brenda was 9, she performed at the Swainsboro Music Tobacco Festival and made $35. That money went straight to groceries. But the stress of Music, carrying her entire family's survival on her tiny shoulders, was already affecting her health. She was tired all the time. Sick often. Her childhood was being drained from her one show at a time. Things didn't get better. They got worse. The family moved into a trailer park. When she was just 10, a radio DJ named Peanut Faircloth started booking her at adult clubs. She saw things no child should ever see. Men drinking too much, women being mistreated, grown-ups, Music, acting out in ways that made her feel like the world was too big and too dark. On her 12th birthday, Brenda was in Las Vegas, not with friends, not with Kate, but in a hotel room alone because children weren't allowed on casino floors. She had to go through kitchens just to get to the stage. And still, she, Music, sang. That same year, she was performing with the Ink Spots at the Flamingo Hotel and living in a space full of neon and loneliness. Then, Music, something unexpected happened. On February 23, 1956, she skipped a $30 gig to see Red Foley perform. A DJ helped her, Music, sneak backstage and sing Yamba before the show. The crowd froze. Red Foley couldn't move. "I still get cold chills thinking about the first time I heard that voice," he said. The audience demanded encore after encore. That moment changed everything. On March 31, 1956, Music, Brenda made her national TV debut on ABC's Ozark Jubilee. She sang, "Music, Dynamite," and it exploded. She got the nickname Little Miss Dynamite, and suddenly the country knew her name. But behind that voice, Music, was a girl whose money was locked in a trust fund. Because of the Jackie Coogan law meant to protect child stars, her earnings, Music, were frozen until she turned 21. The family lived off a $75 weekly allowance. Music, the rest of her fortune sat untouchable. Even after buying her mother a house, it burned down. They had to start all over again. In July 1956, Brenda signed with Decca Records. Music, she recorded 7 songs in 2 days in Nashville. She was only 11. The label lied and called her little Brenda Lee, 9 years old, to make her seem even younger. When Brenda Lee walked into the studio in July 1957, she was just 12 years old. But the people around, Music, her weren't treating her like a child. She had to stand on milk crates just to reach the microphone at the Thean Temple in New York. Owen Bradley, her producer, kept pushing her over and over again, telling her to sound like a grown, music, woman. Take after take, they pushed her to deliver the voice of someone 3 times her age. And somehow she did. The song won, Music, Step at a Time hit number 15 on the country charts and number 43 on the pop charts. But, Music, Brenda would later say that something inside her changed that day. She felt like she lost, Music, a piece of her childhood in that room. Just a year later, in October 1958, she recorded Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. She was 13. The song barely sold, Music, 5,000 copies. Radio stations ignored it. Critics thought it was forgettable. Her father had died when she was 8. And by now, Brenda was the one supporting the family. That flop didn't just hurt her career, it shook their finances. But in 1960, Music, the song came back out of nowhere, climbing to number 14 and never slowing down. It's now streamed over 1 billion times and earns millions in royalties every year. That song that almost broke her ended up saving her. In early 1959, when she was just 14, Brenda, Music, was sent on a European tour and opening for her, a tiny group called the Silver Beatles. No one knew them back then, but Brenda did. She heard something in them and even tried to get Decca Records to sign them. The label passed, saying they'd never make it. While the Beatles, Music, struggled to get noticed, Brenda was commanding packed venues and braving rough crowds in post-war Europe. In Hamburg, she performed in clubs with broken windows and leftover scars from World War II. She outsold the Beatles globally that year. Her voice pouring out of a 4 feet 9 inches body stunned audiences. But while the world cheered, Brenda, Music, was missing school growing up on the road. That same year, she recorded Sweet Nothings, which soared to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 12 on the R&B charts. Music, but behind the stage lights, her life was falling apart. Her stepfather left the family in 1959. They ended up living in a trailer park, paying just $72, Music, a month. Brenda, only 15, was performing in clubs full of adults, sometimes past, Music, midnight, just to keep things going. She hadn't been to a school dance, had never had a teenage romance. She was singing love songs while never having experienced love. She had to go to court just to get access to her own money so she could move her family out of poverty. Even with all the struggles, she was earning around $100,000 a year by age 15. On paper, she was one of the richest, Music, teenagers in America. But the reality was ugly. Almost none of that money stayed with her. Managers and agents took their cut. The IRS took theirs. Music, and when her manager, Dub Albritton, died in the mid-1960s, she discovered years of financial damage. No one had protected her. There were no laws back then to shield child stars from, Music, being taken advantage of. She had bought her mother a house after finally gaining access to her earnings. That house burned down shortly after. Then came I'm Sorry in 1960. Brenda was 15 when she recorded it, but the label didn't want to release it at first. They thought a teenager couldn't possibly understand heartbreak, but when they finally did, it hit #1 on July 30th and stayed there for 3 weeks. It sold over 1 million copies, but it came at a cost. Music, her voice, still developing, was pushed to the edge. She recorded that song over and over again, damaging her throat. Doctors, warned it could be permanent. She had to choose between surgery or vocal rest. The scars from those sessions never really healed. By 1961, Brenda was caught in a rivalry with Connie Francis. The music industry fed the fire, pitting them against each other in every magazine, every headline. Francis, was 24. Brenda was just 16. They both sang emotional ballads, and their fan bases overlapped. It wasn't just a competition for sales. It was a fight for identity, for survival in a cutthroat business. Francis knew how to handle the pressure. Brenda, still, barely a teen, struggled with the constant comparisons and whispers that she wasn't enough. Brenda had met Elvis Presley back in 1956 when she was only 11. They stayed close. And while everyone thought he'd give her diamonds, what he gave her instead was something else, a necklace. Not just any necklace, a gold one that read TLC, tender, loving care. He only gave those to the women he truly cared about. Most of his male friends got TCB necklaces, taking care of business. That small gift became one of Brenda's most treasured possessions. She kept it framed next to a picture from the night she first sang at the Grand Ole Opry. In 1962, tragedy struck again. On June 12, Brenda was performing at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill when she dislocated her neck. The injury was so severe she had to be hospitalized, immediately. It was the peak of her career. Her album, Sincerely, Brenda Lee, was climbing toward gold. But the pain didn't stop with her neck. The strain on her voice from years of non-stop touring and recording had caused serious damage. She needed abdominal surgery related to the accident. And for the first time in her life, Brenda had to stop. She stepped off the stage for months. The timing couldn't have been worse. Just ahead was a wave that would change music forever. In 1963, she released Losing You, which, reached #6. It was her last top 10 pop hit. She was trying to grow to mature her sound to stay relevant, but nothing could stop what was coming. In February 1964, the Beatles exploded in America. I Wanna Hold Your Hand hit #1 and stayed there for 7 weeks. By April 4th, they held the top 5 spots on the Billboard chart at the same time. No one had ever done that. Brenda's record sales dropped over 60% that year. Fans moved on. Brenda Lee was only 19 when the world around her started to shift. In November 1963, her song Asheville came out and climbed to #12 on the Billboard Hot 100 the following year. It hit #5 on the adult contemporary chart and even became the 49th best-selling single in the UK in 1964. But this would be her last top 20 pop hit for a while. The British invasion was crashing into American radio, and suddenly Brenda, newly married and still so young, was being told to change. Her label wanted her in nightclubs backed by full orchestras in cities like New York and Las Vegas. Far from the teenage rockabilly world she came from. She didn't get to grow slowly, into adulthood. The industry shoved her into it. In January 1964, she recorded Too Many Rivers written by Harlan Howard, though it didn't come out until May 1965. When it did, it started at #96 and climbed to #13 on the Hot 100 by July 13th. On the adult contemporary chart, it reached #2. It wasn't just another song. It was a signal. Brenda was slowly turning toward country, trying to stay afloat while her old pop style faded. She was in her early 20s and caught between two worlds, watching her chart numbers fall as British bands took over. Her album Too Many Rivers was released on September 2, 1965. Music, packed with covers aimed at both her old fans and the new country crowd. But it was a gamble and not everyone was ready to follow her down that road. By 1966, music, things had gotten heavier. Brenda covered Strangers in the Night for her album Coming On Strong, hoping to ride off the success of Sinatra's version. But even though she kept trying new styles, the world, music, wasn't listening the way it used to. Worse, her longtime manager, Dub Albritton, died. And he wasn't just a manager, he was a father figure. After his death, Brenda spiraled into depression. She felt lost in a music world that no longer had a place for her. She and producer Owen Bradley, Music, tried everything. They recorded blues tracks and even worked with New Orleans musicians, but no one seemed to care. Even when, Music, critics liked what she did, the public didn't show up and all the touring left her exhausted. Then in 1973, something changed. Music, Christofferson had written a song called Nobody Wins. And Bob Beckham, who handled publishing, brought it to Brenda. She agreed to record it for MCA Records and this time it worked. The song reached number 5 on the US country chart and hit number 1 in Canada. It was her first major country hit and led to the album Brenda, which broke, Music, into the top 10 of the US country albums chart. Between 1973 and 1975, Music, she had 5 more top 10 country singles. One of her new collaborators was Shel Silverstein, better known for writing children's books, but with Brenda, he wrote about heartbreak and real adult pain. Vegas had always been part of her journey. Even at age 12, she was performing in major clubs. By Music, the 1960s, she was a regular on those stages. Places like the Stardust had ties to organized crime, but there's no Music, real proof Brenda was ever involved. What is true is that the non-stop performances nearly destroyed her body. In 1974, she was rushed into surgery for life-threatening blood clots. Her vocal cords were already worn out from years of overuse, and she was, Music, forced to stop performing for nearly a year. In 1974, her comeback came in the form of Big Four Poster Bed. The song hit number 4 in the US and number 2 in Canada. Shel Silverstein had written it, and Brenda's performance was filled with raw emotion. Music, but recording it wasn't easy. She fought with producers who wanted a more polished sound, while Brenda insisted on keeping it honest and mature. The album Brenda Lee now came out in November 1974 and gave her another top 10 hit, showing everyone she could still lead in country music. That same year, another Silverstein song, Wrong Ideas, climbed to number 6 in Music, the US and number 5 in Canada. Released in December 1973, it was part, Music, of her album New Sunrise. She was now 30 and proving that her voice still, Music, had power and heart. Though rumors of a stalker followed her during these years, they were never confirmed. What was confirmed was her growing reputation in Nashville as someone who could handle deeply, Music, emotional songs. She was no longer chasing her past. She was building a new future. In Music, October 1979, Brenda recorded even better using overdubbing for the first time. Music, her health was fragile. After her 1974 emergency surgery, she later damaged her vocal cords so badly that by 1999, she was diagnosed with cysts. Doctors warned that surgery might destroy her voice for good. So, she chose silence and rest over risk. Despite it all, Even Better gave her hits, Music, like Tell Me What It's Like and The Cowgirl and the Dandy, proving she could still lead the charts even after everything. Her collaboration with George Jones in Music, the 1980s added another layer to her story. They recorded Hallelujah, I Love You So for Jones's 1984 album, Lady's Choice. The duet hit number 15 in the US, Music, and number 13 in Canada in 1985. But working with Jones wasn't easy. His nickname was No Show Jones for a reason. By 1979, he had dropped under 100 pounds and was homeless, addicted to both cocaine and alcohol. Still, Brenda showed up and sang with him. His wife Nancy later said those sessions helped him recover. Brenda, music, wasn't just a singer now. She was part of someone else's survival story, too. By 1980, she had racked up 47 U.S. chart hits. Only Elvis Presley, the Beatles, and Ray Charles, music, had more in that era. But behind the numbers was a devastating truth. When her manager, Dub, died in 1971, Brenda found, music, out she had only $40,000 left in her account. Worse, the estate said she owed $250,000, music, on her Decca contract. She had to pay $20,000 over 5 years just to clear her name. Then in 1988, she filed a $20 million lawsuit, music, against MCA Records. She said they had failed to pay her royalties, signed foreign deals without her permission, and even blocked audit attempts. One report showed over 236,000, music, missing. She had sold more than 100 million records worldwide, but the money was gone. In 1985, Brenda Lee stood on stage as she was inducted into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. But behind the applause was a heartbreaking truth she later revealed in her book, Little Miss Dynamite. She had been just 8 years old when her father died in a construction accident. And suddenly the entire family depended on her. Record executives used her like a product, branding her as Little Brenda Lee, 9 years old, while pushing her into exhausting tours. Her manager, Dub Albritton, even told the French press that she was a 32-year-old, music, just to stir up attention. By the time he died in 1971, she discovered that after all her success, she had only $40,000, music, to her name and owed $250,000 to lawyers. In the end, she settled for $20,000, music, paid over 5 years. The 1990s brought a wave, music, of rockabilly back into the spotlight, and Brenda's anthology album became popular with new fans. But, music, while her songs were climbing again, her body was breaking down. At 50 years old, she developed a blood clot in her lung. It was so serious that if it hadn't been caught in time, it could have killed her. She'd already, music, been battling vocal cord injuries and painful abdominal issues since the 1970s. The scare made her question everything. She realized she might have to step away from music, the thing that had defined her since childhood. In 2002, she was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But instead of a celebration, it turned into another, music, painful chapter. She had been passed over in 1990 and again in 2001. Some critics accused her of stealing music from black artists. A Los Angeles, Music, Times letter blasted the Hall of Fame for disrespecting her while honoring average male acts. Brenda had spent her life blending country, rock, and pop. But the industry couldn't look past her image. When she took the stage at the Waldorf Astoria, she said with tears in her voice, "It's music, long way from the Georgia cotton fields." But even after her induction, some people kept insisting she didn't belong there. In 2023, music, something unbelievable happened. At 78 years old, her song Rocking, Music, Around the Christmas Tree hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It took 65, music, years to get there. That made her the oldest artist to ever top the chart, and it had been 63 years since her last #1. The song had over 967,000, music, consumption units and 1 billion Spotify streams. But even with all that, she earned only around $250,000. Spotify pays between $0.030, music, and $0.05 per stream. She had to split it with her label. Mariah Carey makes millions from her Christmas hit every year. Brenda made nearly nothing. She'd signed her contracts, music, long before streaming even existed. Back in April 1963, Brenda Lee shocked everyone by marrying Ronnie Shacklet, music, in secret. She was only 18. They had met just 6 months earlier at a Bo Diddley and Jackie Wilson concert. The wedding happened at Renner Church of Christ, and Brenda's own family didn't even attend. When she gave birth to their daughter, Julie, exactly 1 year later, the rumors exploded. Tabloids, music, claimed she'd been pregnant before the wedding. It wasn't true, but the whispers never fully stopped. One of the most bizarre reactions came from a prince in Arabia who had apparently been courting her. Music, her mother and even her manager wrote furious letters. The industry thought her image was ruined, but Brenda stayed with Run. They built a life together, music, even when everyone told her not to. After her daughters were born, Brenda slipped into a deep depression, but no one knew. In the 1970s, people didn't talk about postpartum depression. When Julie was born in 1964, 6 weeks early, she wasn't expected to survive. She had a condition called music hyaline membrane disease. The only reason she lived was because of Dr. Mildred Stallman, the same doctor who helped the Kennedy music children. That trauma never left Brenda. She was touring, recording, and smiling on stage, but inside, music, she was breaking. She had surgeries on her vocal cords. She had serious abdominal problems, but she kept going because she thought she had to. One day in the late 1950s, 13-year-old, music, Brenda Lee worked up the nerve to walk up to Judy Garland at the Sahara Hotel in Las Vegas. They were both, music, performing there. Brenda asked for advice. Judy looked her in the eye and said, "Don't ever let them take your childhood." That stuck with her for the rest of her life. She tried to be normal. She went, music, to public school, became a cheerleader, did all the regular teenage things. But when Judy died in 1969 from an overdose at just 47, Brenda felt the warning hit even harder. Judy had been chewed up by fame, and Brenda knew she could have ended the same way. In the 1980s, the pressure got worse. Music, Brenda was in her 40s, but the industry still wanted her to be Little Miss Dynamite. Managers, music, pushed her to stay thin and look young. The pressure caused her to struggle with her weight, her health, and her mental, music, state. She went through multiple surgeries, vocal problems, and emotional breakdowns, all while trying to smile for the cameras. She later admitted it was one of the darkest times in her career. By the 1990s, she had started losing everything. Dub Al Britton had died in 1970. But the financial mess he left behind kept haunting her. She made bad investments, trusted the wrong people, and almost lost everything. She had to sell her music, personal items just to stay afloat. One of those items was a necklace from Elvis Presley, a TLC pendant he only gave, music, to women he truly cared for. Elvis had given it to Brenda when they met during her Grand Ole Opry debut in 1957. Selling it broke her heart. In December 2024, Brenda turned 80. UMG Nashville threw a small holiday party for her. Stars like Trisha Yearwood, Nancy Jones, and Ringo Starr sent love. Everyone was stunned when Brenda revealed she had actually outsold Elvis Presley during the 1960s. She had 47 hits on the charts that decade. Only Elvis, the Beatles, and Ray Charles had more. Music, she was the most successful female artist of that entire era. She had signed with Decca Records before her 12th birthday, and now she was the only woman in both the Rock and Roll and Country Music Halls of Fame just days after her birthday. On December 16, 2024, PBS released a documentary called Brenda Lee, Rocking Around. It showed the world what she went through. She had grown up in extreme poverty in Atlanta. Her father's death forced her into adulthood. But unlike many child stars, she never turned to drugs or collapsed under the pressure. She kept her faith. She kept her family. The price was enormous. In 2023, at 79 years old, she topped the charts, music, again. She became the oldest woman to ever do it, beating Cher and Mariah Carey. She had sold over 100 million records worldwide. But when People magazine, Music, asked her what it all meant, she said the success came at a cost. She missed out on family. She missed out on childhood. She missed moments she could never get back. Then in 2024, her most famous song hit another milestone. Rocking Around the Christmas Tree crossed 1 billion streams on Spotify. She couldn't believe it. She said, "I was dumbfounded. I can't even think that high." The song was now 7x platinum. Instead of keeping the money for herself, she donated much of it to charities helping poor children. She remembered what it felt like to have nothing, and she wanted to make sure other kids didn't go through what she did.